Hello, everyone. Welcome to Now You're Talking. It's the third in a series of breakfast events from us at Hubbub designed to support people to engage the public and change behaviours around sustainability. Hubbub is a creative environmental charity, and we're all about inspiring action that's good for the environment and for everyone. My name's Alex Robinson. I'm Hubbub's CEO, and I will be your host for this morning. Now, this is a short session. It's going to be fast-paced, and I hope it will leave you with some ideas and tips that you can put into practice in your own work. Today's topic is crucial. There is a huge gap between the language used by sustainability professionals and what the wider public understands. Not only does no one want to join us on our journey to net zero, but for example, less than half the public would feel confident even defining single-use plastic. We need urgent action on the climate crisis, and jargon is getting in our way. We have three special guests this morning who have all wrestled with this question and emerged as the winner. I'm going to warm them up with a Q&A, and then it's over to you for questions from the floor for about 20 minutes. Please pop your questions in the Q&A box, which you'll find at the bottom of the Zoom. It's different to the chat box, and we will come to them in a bit. You can also vote on other people's questions. So onto our panel. I am joined today by Sam Sutaria, the CEO of WaterBear. That is a media platform and content studio that uses storytelling to drive change. With a background in conservation and media, Sam leads campaigns and storytelling initiatives that are building a growing community of change makers worldwide. Also, it's Sam's birthday today. So happy birthday to Sam. It's very good of you to join us. We also have David Heyman, who is a campaign director at Make My Money Matter. And as campaign director, David leads on the organisation's public campaigning efforts, mobilising citizens across the UK to use their banks and their pensions to help tackle the climate crisis. If you've seen Olivia Colman as Olivia Colmine, then I guess that means David is doing his job. And last but not least, Rosie Gordon-Lennox, who is head of brand at Hubbub. Rosie has led the communications of so many of Hubbub's projects, including the award-winning Halloween campaign, Eat Your Pumpkin. Rosie supports the Hubbub team to use creativity to cut the fluff and translate complex issues into messages that make sense for people every day. Thank you all for joining us this morning. So, on with the questions. First of all, Sam, I'm going to come to you. Why do you believe in taking creative approaches to environmental communications? Why should we even be talking about this, and what benefits have you seen in your work?
Well, firstly, thank you very much for the birthday wishes. Dialing in from a Copenhagen hotel, so not exactly a glamorous start to my birthday, but yeah, great to be here, and thank you, Alex, and the whole Hubbub team for having us. Look, for the last 12 months, we've really deep dived on a research study that sits behind WaterBear and our community building strategy. As you mentioned, Alex, we're a storytelling company really dedicated to systems change through effective campaigning, impact campaigning, storytelling, and video production. And what's really clear to us is that 77%, if not more, of our audience really want to do more, right? That's just a really amazing thing, right? We genuinely believe that people do care and they want to do more, but only 30% of that audience actually know what to do or how to do it. And I think a big part of that, obviously it's a complex problem. We all know why, there's myriad reasons why these things are difficult to communicate, but really it is a crisis of communications. People are feeling overwhelmed and really lost as to how they can best use their time because there's so much noise out there. So we have really focused on how do we simplify the complex and turn effectively logic into magic. And that's something that we focus on massively. So how do we do that? We really experiment a lot with format and really try to use the tropes of entertainment-based programming to really cut through that noise. To give an example, last year we created a music video with one of the most famous Italian composers and pianists, Ludovico Einaudi, and this really was a perfect example of how we could use a music video format to reach an entirely untapped audience for us in Italy. and really communicate a really difficult story, which was tropical bird poaching and the harm that that's creating to the environment, through a really innovative, creative format. And that really has started to work very well for us, experimenting with things like scripted formats, short form, entertainment-based programming, and the like. So really, we've seen huge benefits, to answer your question, in playing with creativity and not falling into the trap of really telling stories that are a little bit documentary led and a bit traditional. And that's something that we're really excited about. I think everyone's also seen what's happened with projects like Mr. Bates versus the Post Office. When a panorama documentary can be kind of falling flat, and then as soon as you start to script things, you can start to really explode into that collective imagination and really reach that zeitgeist of the community that you're trying to talk to. And we've seen massive success with us at Waterbear. So really, just to kind of conclude on that, I think we as a company, of course, focus on impact programming. How do we really target that very specific demographic? How do we target that very specific niche with the story and campaign that we're running? But then really try to push the boundaries on the creative entertainment format that enables us to do that.
Brilliant. Thank you, Sam. I love turning logic into magic. I think I'm going to remember that. David, I'll come to you next. It's a long question, so I will repeat it for you. Why do you believe in taking creative approaches to environmental communications, and what benefits have you seen in your work?
Yeah, I mean, a couple of things, and thanks again for having me as well. I think building off what Sam said, I think there's two kind of key pieces of context for us all to think about. One is that for us to achieve the change we want to see in the world, and I say we because I think lots of people out there really want to see a better world, which is better for people and better for planet, we're going to need public support and public engagement. Even if you think that government change is what's needed, or you think finance sector change is what's needed, or business change is what's needed, that will only be predicated on the public being engaged, being active, and holding those institutions to account. So I think context one, you need the public involved and you need to communicate well with them. I think context two, something Sam touched on, is people are bombarded and overwhelmed with information, and be that through television, be that through social media, be that through their friendship circle. There is just a huge wealth of content which is being pumped at us at any one time. And when was the last time any of us were really stopped in our tracks by a piece of content or a piece of communications and made us stop and think? There'll be examples, but not many. And I think that's why you really need engaging creative content to tell the story, to mobilize the public, and to try and drive change and really engage people. I think secondly, I'm not sure we'd ask this question in other sectors. Why do we need creativity in business? Why do we need creativity in sport? Why do we need creativity in government? It's the same in the environmental world or in sustainability. Creativity is core to moving forward, to developing, to improving, to innovating. I think we need all of those things in this space. So I think it's a really kind of central part of everything we do. And for us at Make My Money Matter, it's a core part of who we are as well. We were set up to help raise awareness of the links between our pensions and climate change. Now you're going to need some creativity and some humor to get that through. We launched during COVID, again, a time of maximum information overload for people. So creativity is really, really critical there. And I think just some of the principles that we apply when looking at it. One is to try and be unique, stand out from the crowd, differentiate yourself from others. Two is to really use humor, make things funny as much as possible. Again, a really powerful way at cutting through and mobilizing people. Three is to play on that balance between making people feel uncomfortable, but empowered as well. So highlighting maybe awkward truths, but empowering them to take action. And the fourth is making it personal, making this a kind of human connection, human story, which really resonates with people. And last, something I think, Alex, you touched on in your question, is about making things simple as well. In the world, the climate space, the sustainability world is complicated. And so translating these messages into simple, jargon-free, easily understandable principles and ideas is absolutely critical to kind of getting that message across.
Brilliant. Thanks, David. And that chimes so much with our work at Hubbub too. So yeah, Rosie, let me come to you with the same question.
Thanks, Alex. Yeah, completely agree with everything Sam and David have said, and great to be here and see so many people on the call. I think it's interesting that great communications and creative approaches have been used often to drive like bad things, drive consumerism often. Yeah, and actually for us, looking at the environmental space, often quite bad communications have been used to drive good things. So we felt like there's a real opportunity to use the creativity that ad agencies and that the creative sector generally is using to create change in a positive way, so to drive positive behavior around environmental challenges. And at Hubbub, we're all about inspiring action that's good for the environment for everyone. And we were set up to ultimately reach those people who didn't feel that the kind of bad comms of the environmental space were reaching them or feeling like it was relevant to them due to the over jargoned language and the worthiness. So we need creative approaches, as both Sam and David have said, to stand out from the jargon and to reach those people who otherwise would have been switched off. And we need to be creative so that we can meet them where they're at, so that we can reframe an issue and help them see it in a new light, to then ultimately encourage them to take action. And we've really seen creative approaches benefit our work massively, from reframing certain really dry issues like cigarette litter into more playful campaigns through our ballot bin and through our plastic butts campaign. And similarly with sustainable diets, traditionally, there's a lot of jargon that could be used, and we wanted to reach a new audience, football fans specifically, with a campaign that we ran last year called Manchester is Green, where we encouraged 70 Manchester-based football fans from United and City to ultimately revamp their kitchen habits. And we really saw the benefit of using creative language for this. So instead of going down the kind of more technical, jargony, alternative proteins route to encourage them to eat less meat, instead we talked about tactical substitutions and healthy halftime snacks, and we did on-the-spot match day challenges. So we used really playful language to meet them where they were at in their interest, which was football, and use that as a hook to then change their behavior. And it worked. And at the end of the 3-week challenge, 70% of that group were eating less meat and 83% were wasting less food. So yeah, across our work, from sustainable diets to electronic waste to cigarette litter, we've seen that being playful and creative in how we reach those new audiences has been really beneficial for us.
Brilliant. Yeah, thanks, Rosie. And it's interesting to see how, in that football example, how just doing stuff that's like puns on footballers and names and stuff makes a tricky subject just become so appealing and less threatening for people. For people who have arrived at a little bit later, and there are 163 of us in here now, there's a Q&A box. So please drop your questions for our guests in there, and in a moment I will get to those. And there's a comment in that Q&A box about this feeling pre-recorded because we can't see each other and don't have a sense of community as a result. And I do concur with that. It's a quirk of the Zoom kind of webinar format that we have a Q&A box and we have us on the screen, but you can't actually see everyone's faces like we could if we were in a normal Zoom meeting. So I'm sorry about that. But if you share your questions in the chat, we will get to as many of those as we can shortly, and I think that will aid kind of interactiveness of the session. But I promise you, we're here and live on a Wednesday morning. So next question is, what tips do you have for translating climate jargon into relatable language? Because we really need this one. David, I'm going to come to you first.
Sure. Yeah, I think I'd just build off some of the principles which have been mentioned already, and then maybe go into some specifics. So at a principle level, I really like Rosie's framing on playfulness. I think adding that element of fun, humor, play to what and how we're communicating is really, really important. And so I think that's critical to start with. I think second, again, something which was just touched on, is trying to make communications content people actually want to watch rather than content feel like it's worthy, or they're being forced to watch, or they're feeling guilted into watch. So really kind of designing it with a consumer first approach, someone who actually wants to engage in this rather than feels like they're being lectured to. So I think setting those principles up really up front are really important. And then I think some overall tips and some examples. I think specificity is always good. Big general terms, less engaging for people. I think losing the science, as you alluded to at the start, Alex, most people can explain what single-use plastic is, what net zero means, what the transition is, but they could get the principles behind them, which is less waste, less rubbish, jobs for people in the future. So I think we're so oftentimes so wrapped up in our own language, in our own jargon, in our own world, and understandably so, because it's what we're doing day in, day out. We don't realize that most people, while they may share the same principles and the same aspirations, they probably don't share the same language. So it's kind of losing some of that science. I think losing some of the big numbers as well. We can all throw around huge numbers all the times about carbon or about money or about waste, but actually above and beyond a certain point, it starts to lose meaning. But if you can translate it and bring it back to real examples for real people, that's very powerful. An example we've got is, we did a piece of research which found that £88 billion of UK pension money was invested in the fossil fuel industry. Most people didn't realise that. Translating £88 billion, it kind of loses meaning after some point, but we worked that out, which is £3,000 per pension holder in the UK. That feels real and immediate to individuals, rather than 88 billion in an industry which feels quite distant and aloof sometimes. So I think translating those big numbers into things which are relatable. Similarly, I think we see this with talking about scientific language, 1.5 degrees of warming. Again, trying to understand what that practically means for people. There's some great research which is done, which is about the amount of wildlife lost for every 0.1 of a degree, or the amount of sea level rise for every 0.1 of a degree. Otherwise, you're kind of saying 1.5 degrees, 1.7 degrees, that's just a warmer day for most people. So really trying to bring it to life with specific examples, I think helps. And then make simple, go back to first principles on this stuff. So again, when we talk about pensions, most people may not realize what that is. We try and use language like our money, our future. Try and really take this away from either scientific language or kind of industry language, and make this things that people can really understand and relate to. And then I think underpinning all of that, like we've talked about, is the power of humor, the power of the shock factor, and the power of contradictions. Something again that we draw on in our work throughout is highlighting these kind of sometimes accidental consequences of the impacts of our money versus our lifestyle decisions. And so for us, that's showing that you may be a vegan, but you continue to invest in the meat industry. You may be a doctor, but you're invested in tobacco. You may be a climate campaigner, but you're invested in fossil fuels. So showing those accidental contradictions, using a bit of humor, bringing it back to the individual and their experience, I think are good principles to try and apply to translate that language.
Thank you, David. I love that. And it's so interesting to see, like, people do reach for those big numbers so often, and yet they're so unimaginable and unrelatable. So it's great to hear how you break those down to make them relatable. Rosie, how about you? Tips for translating climate jargon into relatable language?
Yeah, I mean, I think David had most of the theory covered. But just to build on some of his points, I guess I think a big one for us is keeping it simple, both in terms of the way we communicate and how much we say at one time to each audience. So I think, yeah, keeping it simple in terms of speaking in really plain language, speaking as you would saying it out loud. We often do encourage people to, and I often say what I'm writing out loud. It really helps to bring it. And if I'm like falling over my words or being like, why does this sound so lengthy, then that's a good sign to cut it down. And then in terms of how much you say, one of our designers actually used a really nice analogy for the power of saying less and being really focused in what you say, by using an analogy about tennis balls, that if you throw someone one tennis ball, they're more likely to catch it. Whereas if you throw them loads of tennis balls, they're unlikely to catch any. So we can look at that with messaging. If you throw loads of different stats and information at our audience, then they're unlikely to catch any of it. So what's the one tennis ball that you want to throw that people can catch and really take hold of? And we've been running, as Alex touched on at the beginning, Eat Your Pumpkin campaign at Halloween each year to basically show how weird it is that, you know, millions of pumpkins get bought, carved and not eaten and then go to waste. And we have really simplified the message for this campaign, and it's really paid off. Literally, the campaign name is Eat Your Pumpkin. That is the one call to action. That's the one thing we want people to do. And that has really resonated with people. It's easy when there's so many stats and information that you want to share, and to actually pull out that one thing for people and meet them where they're at with that. So yeah, keeping it simple. And
great, thank you, Rosie.
I've got more, but I'm conscious of time.
I'm gonna actually deviate from the plan a little bit here, because I do have some more questions lined up for you guys, but we're getting so many good questions in the Q&A that I want to move on to the questions from the audience. So thank you for sharing those, and you can, just as a reminder, drop questions into the Q&A box at the bottom. You can also vote on other people's questions, and that will bring it towards the top of the list. I'm going to start, Sam, with you. I've got a question. We have to ask a question from Pearl from the Bureau of Silly Ideas, which I really hope is a real thing, because that sounds excellent. She asks about how you might stimulate change in audiences that don't directly engage with your content. I think you talked about systems change earlier, and I wondered whether you'd thought about this, like your role as an actor within the system, as well as a producer and distributor of content. So how do you use your role to create behavior change in the wider community for greater effect?
I think it's a great question, and just have to echo what my fellow panelists have said in terms of tactics and strategies for creating the results and impact that we want to see. I think certainly the role of humor and simplicity is massively important. Look, stepping back, we were at Sundance Film Festival in January, and I think between 15 and 20,000 films were submitted to Sundance this year, right? And about 90 were selected, right? So there's a supply and demand issue in the documentary and factual communication space. There is a lot of content, and there is not a lot of people and not a lot of window shopping space, effectively, or real estate on the platforms to achieve the results that all these filmmakers want. The role of community, to answer the question, and Pearl, thank you very much for the question, is really where we see the future of distribution, because what we need to do is create micro communities and new innovative distribution tactics to enable the results that we want to see from an impact perspective, right? What we talk a lot about at Waterbear is the idea of metrics that really matter, as opposed to the traditional tropes of performance marketing, clicks, views, impressions. Of course, it's a great gauge of how your campaign's performing, but really what we want to try and do is bring in a new class of metrics, to answer your question, Pearl, and try to induce proper long-term behavior change into the audiences that watch our content. And sometimes that can be making a film for one person or 5 people or a policymaker, or even just a community that really needs to see that story. And that is really how I think we can get the communities that we talk to really involved in the production process. And that really comes down to tactics like community screenings, liberating rights for that process. And again, many other platforms hoard rights and don't enable campaigners and don't enable NGOs and nonprofits and frontline activists to actually access content. And really liberating that community access is super important. Hosting and curating offline strategies as well as online strategies, also massively, massively important. And we see, Alex, to your point, Waterbear's role as a bridge builder between online and offline, and also platform and community. And that really is, let me tell you, not a cheap or easily won exercise, but it's really important to who we are as a brand to be able to build that both online and offline community building strategy. I think I also saw a question in the chat, sorry to jump into another theme, but I think it's really, really important, Alex, that this is not the work of a top-down media platform, right? We're not trying to produce highly expensive, very high quality content at all costs. It really is about flipping that script. And so the way we try to do things is to hero voices from underrepresented communities, from the global south and minority groups, by putting an RFP out to the network every month, every quarter, where we get ideas from all around the world sent to us, and we spend a lot of time curating.
Dan, quick jargon check. RFP.
Very good point. I haven't even followed my own rules. A request for proposals. Sorry. Basically, just saying, send us your ideas. That's a better way of putting it. Thank you, Alex, for the jargon check. And the reason I mention that is because, to the point of a question in the chat, how we tell these stories and the viewpoints from which we tell them is also fundamentally important, and it does not need to break the bank. You know, these creative solutions that the guys have spoken through do not have to be expensive. It's around the production process, the production model, using local crews, using local talent. And I'll close just this point with a great report from the Ellen MacArthur Foundation that does make me smile. It said, we need to ban the non-charismatic expert from TV screens, right? And again, we've spoken a little bit through this, but I think it's a great summary of where sustainability or climate communications has fallen short, because many brands or people with budgets and positions of storytelling authority actually think, I have to be the protagonist for this story. I have to go and tell my own story. I'm the CEO of Waterbear, therefore I am the person who needs to speak about this. Really, we need to completely flip that script and find new ways to tell those stories, working with diverse local voices that does not need to break the bank, and using the sustainability and creative tactics that my fellow panelists have talked about. So I think there's a few answers in there, but I think it's really, really important that we involve community in distribution. One, make sure we tell stories, not your story. Two, and use a really different approach to production. And I guess, you know, another topic for another day, but the technology that's emerging now really hammers down that cost of production in a really exciting way too.
Thanks, Sam. Rosie, I might ask you just to touch on this one briefly. Creative communications on a shoestring, because so many of the people watching this and organizations on this are non-profit startups. Every pound we spend has to count. How do you think about that? And what tips would you give someone who is trying to maximize their creative communications impact on a tiny budget?
It's a really, really good question. I think the first thing to say is that in terms of prioritizing budget or spend or time, I think the most important thing to do is really understand the audience that you're trying to reach and really gather insight from them into what their challenges are, what their barriers are, what their where they're at on their environmental journey. And then you can really tailor your communications to be as relevant, specific, and engaging as they can be. The times that we've really invested in that insight and discovery stage of a project and really put in a lot of time to run focus groups, to speak, but it doesn't even have to be focus groups. It could just be going out on the street, or could be going to meet a community group in whatever way. It can be done cheaply, but just really understanding where they're at and then tailoring the communications. And that way, if people then feel really seen by the communications you're putting out, naturally it will spread and be shared and go from there. I think the other thing to say is that being timely as well with your communications doesn't cost anything, but you can get a lot of value from it. So with Eat Your Pumpkin, for example, tapping into Halloween and using that as a hook to then drive that message about food waste, when a lot of other Halloween conversations were going on, it was actually a really timely and useful way of amplifying our message. So thinking about what hooks you could tap into, what hashtags you can use on social media days that you can then use as a hook to talk about your own communication or your own topic of interest, can be really valuable. So yeah, those would be my two main tips.
We saw that last year, didn't we, with a campaign that jumped on the Barbie versus Oppenheimer trend at a perfect moment, and it just absolutely exploded as a result, with no real spend. So being agile and nimble. And I'd recommend there's a book and a sort of series called Guerrilla Marketing, which is worth a look if you're interested in this whole concept, because there's loads of good tips in there. Rosie, you touched on something that Molly G has raised here, which I think is really important, is the question is, how do we successfully engage with or cater communications to minority groups and those traditionally excluded from sustainability narratives and movements, and examples where this has worked? Could you just respond to that as well, please?
Yeah, so it's again a really good question, and we very often see minority groups most affected by the impacts of climate change, but very often excluded from conversations. And in terms of successfully engaging with them, I think again it's not parachuting in. It's very much it's a work of deep listening. Essentially, it's speaking to them, understanding their challenges. Very often the communities we speak to, sustainability isn't really on their radar or isn't a priority for them at the moment. There's a lot with the cost of living crisis. There's a lot of other priorities that is ahead of them. And our job will be about matching what their priorities are with whatever project or campaign we're running, to then find that mutual kind of Venn diagram of, let's say they're wanting more safety in their community and community cohesion, then our growing project would actually help cater to that. But it's really understanding what their challenges are and listening to them and letting them tell the stories as well firsthand. So not you telling stories on behalf of them, letting them share their own stories and experiences of the work that they're doing or that you're doing that's benefited them, because that way they can then speak authentically from lived experience and inspire others to do what they're doing, rather than how you interpret their activity.
Brilliant. Thank you, Rosie. And before I move on, Rosie, there's a question in the chat from Chiara Vona, which perhaps you could type a reply to
Yes.
while you're off mic. About how
I'll
we
do that
measure
then.
our campaigns. I'm not sure if it's about the Manchester is Green or the pumpkins, but we can definitely answer that. David, same question. I've got two questions for you, I think, David, but same question to you. Do you think with your campaign, do you think about reaching wide varieties of audiences, and particularly audiences that are underserved?
Yeah, so it's a great question, and I think just building off, I think the question, but one on how to do this on a budget. We're a small non-profit, limited budget, and I think some of the recommendations made have been great. And just a couple of extra points to add. One is, do less better is what I'd say. I think there's really trying to don't try and pump out content the whole time for the sake of pumping out content. I think I would spend more time and invest in getting a couple of ideas right. And it's not to say don't trial and test, but I think don't try and feel like you have to be always on when there are moments that actually you can really lead to, which are a bit more higher profile, a bit more thought through, a bit more thoughtful. And so I'd think about that. I'd really, in a world of overwhelming content, to think about originality. And it's a really easy thing to sit here on a screen and say be original, but I think that the value in creating new ideas, new content, new approaches, like some of the examples from Waterbear or from you guys, or the Eat Your Pumpkin, these are new. These are getting people to think differently and provoke a conversation in a different way. And I think a way to do that is to speak to people from outside of your organization, your community, your world, and it's not just the voices of the communities who sometimes we are working with, but it's actually just to speak to different organizations, get different ideas, because like I said, we can be quite insular at times and so focused on what we're doing and so wrapped up in our world and the complexities, when actually it's really helpful to take a step back and speak to people who don't engage in pensions every day of the week, or who don't engage in plastic waste, or who don't engage in eating less meat in a formal manner, but will have really interesting, diverse, different ideas which help you kind of take the story out of your world and into a world which may go further and faster. And we've had the kind of pleasure and fortune to work with some great creative agency who've really helped us on that journey and helped us think differently. And so I think that's just a couple of principles on that. And then in terms of how we try and communicate and who we try and communicate to, we really see it as quite a wide funnel. So we try and do mass public audience pieces. We're probably less specifically targeting 24 to 30-year-olds in urban cities in Northern England, and more, how can we make a lot of noise in a quick way about a topic which not many people understand and get this front and center. So our piece with Olivia Coleman, you mentioned beforehand, absolutely did not have a sophisticated audience segmentation strategy. It had a let's make a big bang, let's make some noise, let's get this in both the Telegraph and in the Daily Star, let's get Gary Lineker sharing it and Greta Thunberg sharing it. Let's just make some noise and get it out there as much as possible. And the kind of lack of sophistication in that really did provide us with the air cover to then go and do the more sophisticated activity, super helpful in allowing us to then go and do the more specific, targeted, focused work, which is where we hope we can achieve scaled systemic impact.
Brilliant, thank you, David. There's a few questions about measuring impact of campaigns, and this could be really difficult with communications work relative to some more like in-depth and in-person engagements or projects that we might do. Sam, as a someone who's sharing broadcast and content, how do you think about figuring out like whether it's working from an impact and mission perspective?
Look, Alex, this is a question we've wrestled with since the beginning of the company, and I think it's a question we'll continue to wrestle with for many years yet. And I don't think there's a simple answer, to be truthful. The way we approach it at WaterBear is a bit of a multi-level strategy. Of course, we are in a unique position where we are building a community of individuals who revisit our platform on a week-on-week basis, and that gives us a really interesting data set from which to start looking at those slightly long-term behavior trends and shifts in our community. And we're starting to look at those data over the long term. So really, audience segmentation, looking at how we can work with small groups and small test groups to say, how have the impacts of our campaigns, our content, our films, our work really started to influence your long-term downstream behaviors. To give an example around food, we've worked a lot in the food space, and how can we actually start to show that people's choices in shops and in the supermarkets and in restaurants are actually starting to be influenced by our work. And obviously not everyone is in the position where they can start to communicate with an audience over the long term. And so then you're starting to really fall back on more of those shorter term strategies in terms of those campaign reports and bits and pieces. I would share that something that we're really excited about is actually live in-moment measurement. So looking at the responses from a neuroscience perspective and the befores and afters of audiences while they are watching films. And this is something that we're really excited to work on over the coming weeks and months, and looking at test groups where we have screenings, working with new partners in the US to actually show the effect of filmmaking and story on our brain's biochemistry, and actually show live in moment reporting for behavior trends and changes in our audiences. Of course, not everyone has access to that kind of technology, and that's something that we're very, very excited to get our hands on. What I would say is that the downstream impacts of content and campaigns really can focus on three levels of conversation. The first, obviously, being on the ground, quite measurable impacts that you can look at, that we often work with NGOs, frontline partners, campaigners, and nonprofits on the front line, and seeing really clear behaviors and impacts of our content and campaigns on those groups can be something that is quite easy to measure, right? Whether it's funds on the ground, signatures on a petition, that kind of stuff is obviously quite binary and quite simple to measure. The second, of course, is more of the kind of hearts and minds effect, in terms of actually what is that content making people feel, making people actually want to go and do, making people want to talk about. And again, that's about interactions with audience and trying to get one-to-one feedback sessions in with some of our audience members and saying, before and after this content, how have your emotions, how have your feelings actually shifted through the engagement with this campaign? And that's something that anyone can really do. It's about getting out there and getting into conversations with the audiences that you're targeting, to Rosie's point. Then the bigger question of how does this actually ladder up into a systems change narrative, right? And that's something that again is a really complex, wicked problem. And we are starting to really look at how communities can actually start to shift those bigger policy moments through the work that we do, and really starting to work with expert partners in the policy space to actually report on how our work and our community building strategy is starting to influence those different bigger agendas, through some of the bigger campaigns at the moment. And I think if you can start to dig into those 3 areas of measurement, you can really start to get a holistic impact of what you've actually achieved with your story or with your film.
Brilliant, thanks, Sam. It's so great to hear that you're thinking about it in those ways as well. We've got so many good questions in the chat, and I'm running out of time to ask them. I would have loved to talk about oversimplification and the risks there, and how to do that. And there's a good question about the public engagement on the water crisis and water system as well, which I feel like, what's the Make My Money Matter campaign for the water industry? Maybe we could take a leaf out of that playbook. That could be really good as well. So I'm sorry we didn't get to all of these questions. Thank you for sharing them all. I hope we got to lots of your points. Before we leave you, I just want to ask you guys to share something with our audience that might be useful and practical for helping them take steps in their work on these issues. So if you could let me know, for people who'd like to learn more, what one thing should they read or watch or listen to? And Rosie, I'll come to you first.
Sure. I've got it right in front of me, actually. This book, Can I Change Your Mind, was given to me when I first started my first job, and I was writing social media captions in the formality of university essays. So my boss put that on my desk, and it's brilliant. It's a great book. It encourages you to kind of really think about your audience and put yourself in their shoes when you're writing any kind of communication. And if I could have a half other recommendation, it would be to follow Etty Bailey King on LinkedIn. She's a brilliant diversity and inclusion communicator, and she has loads of practical tips about how to write in really simple, plain language, and with accessibility, diversity and inclusion in mind. So,
thank you.
Etty
Bailey King. And
Etty Bailey King,
who's the author of your book, Rosie?
She's called Lindsay Camp.
Lindsay Camp. All right.
Lindsay Camp,
thank you. And we'll share that in the. Hopefully, we can share that in the chat. I hope. David.
Yeah, it's actually a short video I watched maybe 4 or 5 years ago. It's really stuck with me. By Naomi Klein and AOC, which is called A Message from the Future, and it's put out on The Intercept. It's on YouTube. We can put it in the chat afterwards. And it's probably one of the best, most honest, realistic, but positive looking takes on what the future could look like in a world affected by climate change, but not determined by it and defined by it. It kind of goes through an illustrated vision of the next 10 to 15 years in America, where they face the problems of climate change, but they also integrate the solutions. It addresses head on that people are going to suffer. There will be problems, there will be environmental and social impacts, but it also paints a really positive picture of what can be achieved if we work together to minimize those impacts. And I thought it was just a brilliant, heartfelt, inspiring yet challenging kind of picture of what the future could look like.
Brilliant. Thank you, David. Yeah, we will share a link for that conversation as well. I haven't seen that, and that sounds excellent. So thank you. And finally, birthday boy, Sam.
Yes, my birthday gift to all of you. No, I'm kidding. There's a fantastic paper authored by Futera, probably an organization that lots of people on this call are aware of, called Stories to Save the World. We absolutely love this. We love their work, of course, as well. It really encapsulates why we need a new narrative to step into, to live and breathe, to imagine a new future for us all, and also gives some really engaging frames for how to tell climate stories. And certainly from our research over the last 12 months, obviously classics like the Aaron Brockovich frame or Modern Family or things like that are really resonating on our platform. People really want to see other people doing amazing things and heroes that they can really embody and be inspired by. And that type of frame is really working for us. So I think it's a fantastic paper. It's available for free online. And just if I can steal Rosie's other half tactic as well, I think all the writing of Rebecca Solnit, I think, is just a great inspiration for me personally. So do just Google anything by Rebecca. There's some fantastic papers out there, what to do about the climate emergency being one, which I think also just gives some really handy tips and tricks for individuals, but also those working at an organizational systems level as well.
Brilliant. Thank you, Sam. Yeah, that Futera paper is really good. Excellent. So thank you, everyone. Those are great tips. We will share the links with everyone. I hope you have all enjoyed this session, and I wish we could have got to more of these questions. I feel like could have spent all morning digging in deeply to some of these issues. They're really pressing and important questions. The next event we've got coming up like this is going to be Rooting for Change, how to support community action for the environment. So that is going to be a good one. If you haven't already, please sign up to Hubbub's newsletter, which is via the link posted in the chat, and keep your eyes peeled for an invitation. We're going to send out a recording of this session afterwards, so feel free to share that with your peers and colleagues and so on. And a link to our newsletter. You can stay up to date with news, events, campaign launches, and everything like that. So that leaves me just to say thank you for joining us. Thank you to my guests for making the time and sharing your expertise with us. It is massively appreciated. And we hope that everyone feels inspired and ready to reach and inspire new audiences of their own. So thank you very much, and have a great day. Thank you.